It was September 7, 1996, and the day before I had arrived in Las Vegas. I had always wanted to see a boxing bout, but I was a bit late getting my ticket. I had never gone to Vegas and had always wanted to go, so I just went to the parties and casinos after the fight, so it wasn't a huge deal to me. Since I'm not particularly comfortable traveling alone, this trip was accompanied by a very good friend of mine at the time. Due to issues he was having with his brother Josh and a man by the name of Alonzo, this friend, Jason, was ready to go. Even if it's risky to be in Las Vegas on the eve of a big boxing event, it's even more exciting when big celebrities are around. At a few of the hotels, we witnessed renowned people getting out of convoys of Chevy Suburbans and Lexus LX 450s. Given that we're not used to living in a big city or frequently seeing celebrities, this was a really exciting experience. Upon nearing the MGM Grand Hotel, a considerable number of noticeably anxious males started requesting the valets to retrieve their cars. The well-known rapper Tupac Shakur was one of these men. I was astounded and in a state of stardom. But before we could get close, he and his entourage stormed out in anguish, instead of having that fan moment. Later on we headed back to where our rental car was parked and tried to decide which club to go to. We heard a few people in cars at traffic lights telling young ladies to go to a club called 662. Of course, we decided to see if we could get in. Just before reaching the rental car is where the night took a SAS. We were about to cross at an intersection. We heard someone from the sidewalk yelling toward a black BMW stopped at the light. As my attention goes to the BMW, I realized that the driver was Suge Knight and the passenger was in fact Tupac waving at the young lady who had just called his name. Seconds later a white Cadillac pulls up next to the car that Suge and Tupac are in and the rear window rolls down. First I see just a gun and an arm aimed toward Tupac. I froze like Hanzo Hasashi's wife and son. Then the gunman leaned slightly out the window shouting, "An entanglement, huh?" and opened fire on the sedan. I clearly saw the face and I will never forget who it was. This man was Will Smith. After the shooting he yelled to the driver, "Yo homes to Bel Air," as the car sped away. As we all know, that was the end to a legendary talent and revolutionary spirit. I say all of this to say, Chris Rock was lucky because Will was not going to let Jada just eat Tupac's shorts or get low down and dirty for him without setting it off. The most memorable and scariest night of my life was being witness to the wrath of Big Willie and knowing he'll leave fresh prints on your head if you mess with Jada. In turn. I lay in bed, my phone on sleep mode, the case covering the screen. It was 2:59 a.m., and the darkness was palpable. I was a single woman living alone, and the silence was my only companion. Suddenly, my phone sprang to life, the screen glowing with an eerie light. YouTube had decided to play a documentary, and I couldn't believe my eyes. A single woman was being murdered, the sounds of her screams and pleas for help filling my room. I woke up with a start, my heart racing. The coincidence was too much to bear. I myself was a single woman, living alone, and this was like a twisted omen. My mind raced back to the memories of domestic abuse, the PTSD that still haunted me. Was this a sign? Was my ex coming for me? The thought sent chills down my spine. 3 a.m., the devil's hour, they called it. The time when the veil between reality and nightmare was at its thinnest. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, of being prey. The documentary continued to play, the sounds of violence and terror echoing through my room. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or look away. And then, it stopped. The screen went black, the silence deafening. I was left with only my thoughts, the darkness closing in around me. I knew I had to get out of there, to escape the clutches of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. I slowly got out of bed, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. But I was alone. The darkness was just darkness, the silence just silence. Or so I told myself. I knew then that I had to take control, to face my fears head-on. I wouldn't let the shadows consume me. I would rise above, shine a light into the darkness, and banish the horrors that haunted me. But as I turned to leave, I heard a faint whisper. "It's just the beginning." And then, nothing. The silence was back, the darkness waiting patiently for its next victim. Let me begin by stating that I was incredibly stressed, overwhelmed, and exhausted at the time of this. I had totaled my automobile, so I was working insane amounts of overtime. I had to walk most days to and from work because it was around 5 miles from where I was living at the time. Nothing unusual happened on this particular day until halfway home from work. 2 police cruisers pass me by as I walk, and then an animal control truck pulls up. I could see the police were cautiously examining the surroundings as they drove because they were moving somewhat slowly. The animal control guy actually stopped and asked if I had seen a dog running loose in the area. The way he asked the question sort of alarmed me. Before he said dog, he paused, broke eye contact, and looked around nervously. I told him hadn't, and he told me to be safe and have a good day before driving away. It was creepy, no doubt, but I had to get home. About maybe a half of a mile further on my trek home, I saw something I still can't explain or understand. Now, allow me to paint this picture to hopefully give you a full understanding of where I was and what happened. So there is a stretch of road where there's no homes, just a mostly wooded area. To my right there's just woods, and to the left of the street is a steep hill with a railroad at the top running parallel to street I'm walking on. Up ahead, the street and the railroad have bridges that cross a small river. Right before the bridge, coming off the left of the street, is a gravel access road which goes under the railroad bridge that I believe leads to a cell tower or something. So as I'm approaching this area about a football field away, I see what looks like a huge hyena. I'm pretty good identifying animals. I mean, I love Animal Planet, Nat Geo, and any animal documentaries. This was definitely not a domestic collie or shepherd. Now, I have never seen a hyena up close and personal, but the shape of this creature was nothing like anything I've seen running wild in my hometown in South Carolina. My next decision may seem crazy, but I grabbed the small knife and pepper spray that I carried at the time and continued to walk down the road. The reason for this is because if I turned back, the only other way from there to get home would take maybe 3 times as long. Keep in mind, I'm exhausted, hungry, and not thinking rationally in that summer heat. Now this animal in a calm trot crosses the street going to my left down that gravel road and out of my line of sight. When I get too close to the bridge, about 2 or 3 minutes after losing sight of this thing, I get ready just in case. I still don't know why I see what I do on that little dirt lane. A soiled, nude man was standing there and briefly made eye contact with me. Then, with a grunt, he turns and dashes into the trees along the gravel road. I started running home as fast as I could. Even though I didn't actually get very far, I still strive to understand everything about it. Was I really so exhausted? Was all this truly visible to me? I have never experienced any hallucinations, as far as I know. I have no idea why, but I feel compelled to share in case anyone has seen something similar. So one evening, my friend and I are simply out for a drive. We just plan on riding about, enjoying some music, and, I hate to say it, impairingly imbibing. We have no specific destination in mind. About a dozen years have passed since then, and I've changed. In any case, it is early December and we are traveling at night on remote back roads in South Carolina. We're kind of laughing and joking and talking about the music we're listening to when we see a guy on the side of the road. This long and empty road is in a wooded area where there's no homes or structures for miles, but here's this guy just walking. When we get close enough, he raises his hands as if he is asking us to stop. To my friend, this was maybe a man asking for help because he's in trouble, but to me I sensed a setup. What got my attention immediately was his size. I'm 6 feet tall and this guy was easily a foot taller than me. He was wearing a long trench coat with a green turtleneck and khaki pants that weren't quite long enough, and those shoes Steve Urkel usually wore. I forget the name. Then there was his head. His head was huge. Not like a giant ball but more like a candy corn shape, large round side at the top and pointed side was his chin, and it was tall for a lack of a more detailed description. His eyes were small and far apart and almost fully closed, so they were dark, reflecting my headlights, but I saw no white. As he waved this enormous thin-fingered hand, I just said, "Hell nah," and accelerated. My friend said maybe he needed help because she is the kind and nurturing type. I'm the type to shoot and answer questions if you can find me to ask them. So from doing maybe 35 miles per hour when we saw him, I speeded up to about 50. We continue through this heavily wooded area heading back to where we live in our city, maybe 25 miles away. The whole time I'm trying to describe this guy and make sure I saw what I thought, and my friend is telling me that I was wrong, all while confirming what I saw. Now at the point of passing tall man, we hadn't seen any other cars or people for maybe 25 minutes of driving, so to me I wasn't wrong. It just didn't add up in my head. So as we begin getting closer to a small town outside of city we live in, we get to a more developed and populated area. We make a few stops at red lights, and then as we turn onto one of the main roads that has heavier traffic, I see something that turned my stomach. Making this right turn by a closed shop, a maybe steps onto the sidewalk from around the building on the corner. Who was it? The same tall strange guy from maybe 40 minutes earlier. This time I noticed his build. He was really tall build, super thin with very wide shoulders. I almost slammed on the accelerator. He just put his arms out to his as if to say, "Why didn't you stop?" At that I was like, I have to get to an area with more people and more safety. How did he get there? How did he know which way we were going? Still till this day I don't get it. Yes, I was drinking and driving, but I wasn't drunk. Maybe 2.5 beers in. I'm starting to get a little scared now, so I'm speeding on my way to my friend's place. We encounter this guy a third time as we approach the county line and drive into the city, which is roughly 20 minutes away from our houses. This time, it appears as though he is disappointed since he is merely shaking his head and hanging it. Upon dropping off my companion, I was a bit at a loss for what to do. I didn't want to go home, therefore I decided to keep driving in a different way. I did return home and never saw him again, but there are still far too many unanswered concerns regarding the person we saw and his possible intentions.